Big day at the Voice of College Football. Great to see all of you here on a Thursday morning. We typically don't see you in the morning, do we? Ha ha ha! Here we are. Just a few minutes before 11 a.m. and awaiting Phil Steele of, the college football preview. Phil Steele joining us at 11. Then we've got Justin Rowe from Blue by 90 to talk Michigan football. And then Arkansas takes the spotlight at noon Eastern time. Ty Hudson is joining us as well. All right. Also, folks, we've got a full day even beyond this live call-in show. We'll fit in some calls between guests, hopefully. And then at 12:30 Eastern time right here, you can keep it locked right here on the main channel, Florida State Live, a special edition. Of course, we come your way each and every Wednesday at 6 Eastern for Florida State football talk. But we've got a special edition. Logan Robinson was out at fall camp, as he will be just about every day, was out at fall camp at day number 1, I believe was on Wednesday, could not join the show. Therefore, we have carved out a special time for Logan, 12:30 Eastern, right here, Florida State Live, day 1 of fall camp for the Seminoles. And a few teams across the nation like Vandy, Hawaii, Wyoming, Illinois, Nebraska, Northwestern, of course, playing in Ireland, playing in week 0. So, of course, they're getting started early, 1 week early. A week from now, we'll be starting fall camp across the nation, and we will continue to provide our huge, massive fall camp preview live streams. We have already presented at Texas A&M a couple days ago. Please check out that video. We've got Notre Dame, LSU, Clemson, and others on tap. Later in the day, we've got another call-in show coming your way at 6 Eastern. Then at 8 Eastern, the Wholesome One joins us, of course, for Miami Live over on the Miami channel. Did I forget? I know they're my least favorite team, so I would be apt to forget. Ohio State Live's at 1:30. The Buckeyes. We go with the Buckeyes talk, of course, with Kevin Noon, Steve Hellwagon, and Tony Gerdeman, 1:30 Eastern on the Buckeyes channel. All right, as we await Phil Steele, hopefully everything's in order. We will catch some of your comments and questions here. I don't even believe I've posted a schedule today as I typically do. People tell me from time to time, Mark, how do we keep up with your schedule? I post it every morning on the community page, but I wanted to highlight the Phil Steele appearance here. Therefore, I didn't lay it out today yet. But again, Phil Steele's coming up in a few minutes. Justin Rowe, Blue by 90, Michigan talk, Arkansas talk with Ty Hudson. Then we've got a new stream coming your way at 12:30 Eastern, Florida State Live, Ohio State Live at 1:30 on the Ohio State channel. And later, the call-in show at 6 Eastern here, Miami Live at 8. Woo! Somebody going to fill in for me at some point? All right. Let's make sure that everyone's lined up and in order. Hopefully that's the case. We will double through here. And I believe we're all set. I believe we've got Phil Steele on the line. Phil, how you doing today?
Mark, can you hear me?
I've got you.
All right, awesome.
It is great to have you on here at the Voice of College Football. Thanks so much for making your summer stop, your annual summer stop with us.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Always good talking to you, Mark. We've been doing this for quite some time, haven't we?
Absolutely, we have. And I know that your entire calendar year is a circus, but especially, of course, once the off season hits, trying to prepare the magazine. So transfer portal, I got to think that NIL didn't really affect you and your preparation for what you do, but transfer portal, of course, has made it quite the difficulty and challenge in setting up the personnel and running down the teams for you. You experienced that for the first time last year. How did it go this time around? Did you learn some things that you could make maybe a little bit more efficient?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll talk to you about the portal, and then I'll give you a prime example from this past year. With the portal, luckily it closed on May 1st. So we knew all the players that were leaving teams. They had to enter by May 1st if they're going to play this year. And we went to the press on June 8th. So we were able to capture the majority of the players that actually transferred in. So a player like Jordan Addison, for example, leaving Pitt to go to USC, we were able to capture that in the magazine. But take you behind the doors, behind the curtain a little bit about how we do the magazine. I do it in a 3 write-through process. It's a 7-month process. The first one is what I call the postseason write-through. And what I do at that point, after watching all the games during the course of the year, and of course following the sport like I do, I then reread through every article that was written about the team the entire season. That's what I call the postseason write-through. Sometimes that involves 400 pages. Sometimes it involves 2,000 pages. But what it really does is it puts me in the flavor of the team, all the ebbs and flows of each position. And a team like USC for this year, for example, in my postseason write-through, they were coming off a 4-8 season, only had 11 returning starters, and had a brand new head coach. And after going through all the positions and writing them for the upcoming year, I basically had a middle of the road in the Pac-12 South. Then the second write-through process is pre-spring, and that's when we add in the freshmen and the players from the transfer portal that have signed by that point, and they started moving up a little bit. But then the final write-through is after I talked to the head coaches. And this year I talked to 120 of the 131 head coaches. And after getting off the phone with Lincoln Riley, ironically, it was on the day he signed Jordan Addison. So now all of a sudden, USC had Caleb Williams at quarterback, my number 1 rated quarterback out of high school the year before, who started at Oklahoma. Mario Williams, my number 2 wide receiver out of high school the year before, who started at Oklahoma. He brought in the Blitnikoff winner in Jordan Addison, a 1,000-yard rusher in Travis Dye. But 12 or 13 players on the defense transferred in, including Shane Lee, who was a 13-game starter at Alabama. Now, all of a sudden, USC was my number 1 most improved team in the country and a contender in the Pac-12 South. So it can show you that in the 7 months, things can change with the transfer portal. And I didn't have to deal with that 10, 15 years ago.
Absolutely, Phil. So in regards to relating those kind of situations to the power poll, is it just a metric slot where you say, okay, these additions, these subtractions just hit in the last day or two, therefore we make these level adjustments, and this team goes from a 90.42 to a 90.57, therefore it slots them 2 spots up? Or does it involve a lot more thought than that?
Yeah, I'm a numbers guy, Mark. So I've got 9 different sets of power ratings, all come upon the power rating in a different way. And then what I do is, as each little adjustment happens, I will go in and adjust all 9 sets of power ratings during the course of the spring. And then the power poll is a combination of my 9 sets of power ratings. I basically factor in all 9. I do have a couple sets that I factor in the highest, the ones I rely on the most, but all 9 sets get a factor in the power poll. And then it's strictly mathematical after that. The power poll is just a straight number based on the 9 sets of power ratings and where they average out.
I got to tell you, Phil, we had a bit of a personal emergency here, because I got your publication, and just about the day or 2 after I got the publication, I was in the midst of a personal housing move, selling the house and moving to another location. So I packed it away thinking, okay, I don't need to keep it right there with me. Packed it away with the other 48 boxes and so forth and so on, expecting in a couple of days, boom, could open it up, be ready to go. Had some moving issues and difficulties. Just like 12 or 13 days later, last night, finally got the move in, was able to unpack. And so I am way behind in catching up. But the one thing that intrigues me, well, there's a zillion things with this magazine, because if some folks out there aren't familiar, here's the thickness of the magazine. It could be 4 feet thick, but what Phil has done has devised a code that is mastermind in regards to sizing down the information, and it is power packed. So Phil, I'm going to point you to the schedule ratings and the difficulty of the schedules, because most would just look at last year's records and say, okay, they play a 4-8 and 8-4 and add up the winning percentage of the previous years and come out with a schedule ranking in terms of difficulty. But you go way beyond that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Mark, and sharing that story about the move. Stories like that, knowing how important the magazine is to people across the country, really keep me going each and every year. But yeah, you point out the toughest schedules, and I can give you some prime examples. If you look just at last year's win percentage, then in this year, Navy plays the toughest schedule in the country. Their opponents were 100 wins, 52 losses last year. A team like Marshall is near the top as well. Their opponents last year were 93 and 59. But my toughest schedules actually take that power poll rating, all my power ratings, factor them into who you're playing this year and strengths and weaknesses. And there are some teams that are far better than they were last year, and there are teams that are far weaker than they were last year. Take a team like Michigan State, for example. I don't think they're going to get to 11 wins this year. So they're not really playing an 11-win team when you play Michigan State, more like a 7-8-win team this season. And so all that's factored in, and then we come up with the adjustments. So my toughest schedules, believe it or not, Auburn, Mississippi State, Georgia Tech, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, very SEC loaded. All those SEC West teams play amazingly tough schedules. And Georgia Tech, they go outside their division and they're playing teams like Clemson and Georgia. So it's just brutal schedules out there. And it shows you that, if you look at Navy's schedule, there are very few Power 5 teams on Navy's schedule. They really don't play the toughest schedule in the country. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and in regards to talking about Auburn, my goodness, they get hammered every year. Of course, play in what I think is by far the best division in college football. Always have the crossover against Georgia. So if the wheel spins and the rotation in the SEC Eastern Division and it comes up a tough Kentucky or Florida team, then they really get hammered. When we talk about Auburn's schedule in particular. Arkansas, of note, with BYU and Cincinnati on the non-conference schedule, stands out, of course, as well in regards to schedule difficulty. We got Phil Steele on the line. He, of course, churns out the standard for college football previews. For the last 25 years, I see that it is the most accurate in predicting the outcomes and the rankings at the conclusion of the season. Phil, do you have an opinion on the AP poll and how accurate it is and its flaws or benefits and positive points?
Yeah, I think the AP poll is positive. I know a lot of folks say shouldn't rank teams in the preseason, but it's very helpful. Heck, I rank teams in the preseason, and it really helps you determine who's going to be strong and who's not. Now, it's not an exact science. And last year, Mark, I think the problem that the AP poll really suffered last year, and a lot of the preseason ones didn't work out. But I'm going to point my finger at COVID on that one, and here's why. Now, this year I talked to 120 of the 131 head coaches out there. And then in my conversations generally last about an hour each, go over every player on the team. Well, last year when I was talking to the coaches, 90% of the coaches, Mark, told me like I was hearing it for the first time. Phil, this is the deepest team we have ever had. We were able to go 3 deep in the spring. Because of COVID, everybody was coming back last year. Well, which teams didn't have everybody back? Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, and Oklahoma. Oklahoma didn't even get to the Big 12 title game. Clemson didn't even get to the ACC title game. Ohio State didn't even get to the Big 10 title game. And heck, Alabama, they lost A&M, nearly lost to Florida, nearly lost to LSU, should have lost to Auburn. They needed a miracle comeback to come back and get that one. So the powers were not the powers last year because everybody had a huge advantage on them, having 90% of their players back. In fact, I had to readjust my experience chart in the magazine last year because every team had 17 plus returning starters. Michigan had 17 returning starters coming back, but the big boys didn't. This year, I think we get to a return of normalcy this year, and I think you'll find the AP poll will be much more accurate at the start of the year. But I like it. I think it's necessary to have polls at the start of the year so that you can look at teams and see strengths and weaknesses, at least get an idea of toughness of schedule, things like that.
Folks, if you have any questions to pass on to Phil, please do that in the comments section. We have people asking if they can ask questions. Yes, absolutely. Phil, how much more time do we have with you?
I'm good. Mark. Let's talk.
So, recruiting classes. Texas A&M brought in what is considered to be the best on paper in the history of rankings. How do you factor that in? Obviously, those players are going to have an impact, but it's probably going to be the least during their freshman seasons. How do you weigh in the recruiting into the first year for those players?
Yeah, and you go look at Texas A&M. A lot of folks are going to point to this being Jimbo Fisher's #1 recruiting class and the best one this year, but he's actually had 5 really good recruiting classes. In fact, when I go over the team with Coach Fisher, you get down to the third team, and they've got what I call VHTs, or very highly touted players, in the third unit, and that tells you they've got the depth to contend with an Alabama and a Georgia. Now, in Texas A&M's case this season, it is young talent. They did lose a lot. They're actually number 124 on my experience chart. And Alabama, which last year was 124 on my experience chart, is now number 52. So I think the experience you have to factor in. Talking to the coaches, you get an idea of which freshmen are going to be able to make immediate contributions. And up on philsteele.com in the next week, we're going to start showing you last year's freshmen and the impact they had. But no, I think it's wrong. And a lot of folks in the recruiting basis, they say, well, you have to recruit this position now because they just lost this player. I feel coaches need to recruit the position 2 seasons out. If you know you're going to lose a player to the NFL, get his replacement in now, get his feet wet, redshirt him, or get him ready for the next season, and then he's ready to step in. I think if you're relying on true freshmen to replace your starters, then you're going to struggle during the next year.
We saw Jeff Brom and company there at Big Ten Media Days in Indianapolis yesterday. And of course, they're coming off a fine 9-4 season and one of the more entertaining bowl games and one of the most viewed of the lower tier bowl games over Tennessee last year. We've got Purdue fan Michael. And I got to say, Phil, that I ranked Purdue solidly in my final top 25 last year. They didn't get the nod from the AP. And Michael's asking, why is everybody sleeping, Phil, on Purdue this year?
Yeah, and with Purdue, they lose some key players from last year. I think you look at David Bell at wide receiver, big loss there. And then defensively, George Karlaftis, Jalen Alexander, Dedrick Mackey at cornerback, Marvin Grant at free safety. So they do lose some key players. They've got the schedule, though. It's a really nice schedule this year in the Big Ten. You look at their crossover games out of the East, they're playing Indiana and Maryland. So they avoid Ohio State. They avoid Michigan. They avoid Michigan State. They do play Penn State, but they get them in the opener at home. That's a nice place to have them. And I was doing a show on Sirius, and the host was talking about Purdue's chances this year. He feels they're going to have a great year. Now, I looked at it, and I see at Minnesota, at Maryland, at Wisconsin, all tough games. Indiana is going to be a much improved team. They were a tough team for me to forecast based on what they lost from last year and what they have coming back. But they've got Aiden O'Connell back at the quarterback position. And so they're going to be explosive if a wide receiver and running game emerges.
Phil, I would think on the surface that all this talk about expansion and realignment and what has already transpired, of course, last summer and this summer in the SEC and the Big Ten wouldn't really affect your preparation or what you do, or does it?
No, it doesn't affect it whatsoever. And in fact, it happened, and that's something that I'll worry about when USC and UCLA actually move to the Big Ten. And it's amazing, though, this conference realignment, isn't it, Mark? And I go back to the first year of the magazine, 1995. I had the Southwest Conference in that magazine. And all of a sudden, the Southwest Conference in year 2 of the magazine disbanded. Some of those teams went to the Big 12. Some went to the SEC. And you're wondering, what's going on with college football? Here we are 27 years later, and it has gone from maybe the 3rd or 4th most popular sport to the 2nd. So the one thing certain in college football is there will be change. My outlook changes in the fact that 2 years ago, I would have been firm on the fact that we're headed to 5 16-team super conferences. Now it appears we might be headed to 2 or 3 20-plus team super conferences. It'll be interesting to see where it shakes out.
Phil, for me, there's always 1 or 2 teams per conference that I find intriguing. They may not be the best teams, but they're intriguing for various reasons. So I go to the SEC and I go to Tennessee. We saw them jump by leaps and bounds. We saw the magnificent year that Hendon Hooker turned in 31 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Josh Heupel doing an outstanding job on the recruiting path as well. And we know about his offense. The defense has to get much better. Your thoughts about the Vols?
Yeah, and I'm going to take you back, Mark, to Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin in 2020. And Ole Miss did not have one of the best teams in the SEC that year. But remember that Alabama game? They
Sure.
were scoring with Alabama each and every play, and you're wondering, are they going to pull off the upset at the end? That's what Tennessee looks like to me this year. They've got a puncher's chance in every game they play. Last year, even though Hendon Hooker didn't start the entire year, they averaged 39 points per game. This year, my computer's calling for them to average 45 points per game. Hendon Hooker, Jabari Small. You've got the receiving core, Cedric Tillman, Jalen Hyatt. They add in Brew McCoy, an outstanding offensive line. And the defense will be improved. All three units rank in my top units in front of the magazine. They go from number 125 on my experience chart all the way up to number 13. So I think Tennessee, I've got them a double-digit dog against Bama at home and at Georgia. But if anybody's going to knock off Bama or Georgia, I think Tennessee has that puncher's chance. Maybe they score like the Ole Miss did 2 years ago. Now, Ole Miss did lose that game. They went for it on fourth down a couple times late. They ended up losing by 14, 15 points. But they had a shot at it in the fourth quarter. And I think Tennessee's got that shot this year. So I agree with you, Mark.
Yeah, I believe that game was like 48 all with about 5 or 6 minutes
Right.
left before Alabama put it away. Let's go to the Big Ten, Nebraska. Of course, the king of the one-score loss, and especially that was accentuated last year with 4 top 10 losses, all games that they could have won. Typical just gaffes, penalties, mistakes in clutch times for Scott Frost. But this is becoming a trend. So you would think as he builds back, you can understand those one-score losses. But this is now piling up 3 to 4 to 5 years for Scott Frost.
Yeah, it has. And I think you have to go back to 2019. Nebraska had a lot of indicators pointing up, and I went out on the limb and put Nebraska my number one most improved team in the country that year, and my number one most improved team never disappoints me. Nebraska disappointed me in 2019. They only got to 5-7, and they lost some close games. This year, they are the poster child for my close wins, close losses article that I have in the magazine. I have found that if you have, and by the way, let me explain what a net close loss is. If you have 2 close wins and you have 5 close losses, then that's 3 net close losses. Because naturally, if you're 1 play away from winning those games, you're also 1 play away from losing those. Well, Nebraska rates an amazing 7 net close losses. And in my research, I've had teams that have had 3 net close losses, 4, maybe even 5. Nobody's ever had 7. But if you do have 4 or more, 90% of the time you have a better record the next year. And here's the stat that really stands out to me about Nebraska. They were plus 56 yards per game in Big Ten play last year, and you finished 1-8. Generally, if you're plus 56 yards per game, and I'm going to have a blog next week on Conference YPG, basically, if you're plus 56 yards per game in a 9-game schedule, you're 6-3 or 7-2. This team somehow managed to go 1-8. So there's all the indicators are there. They should actually be a contender in the West this year, along with Purdue, along with Iowa, along with Wisconsin, along with Minnesota. I can make a case for any of those 5 teams winning the West, but Scott Frost definitely my number 1 coach on the hot seat this year.
And Phil, just to take us back to that transition from 2018 to 19, I was right there with you because Scott Frost comes in, they lose their first 6 games, but they go 4-2 down the stretch. They beat 4 pretty decent opponents, and their 2 losses were last play of the game against the top 15 Iowa team and a 5-point loss in Columbus against the Ohio State team that won the Rose Bowl and won the Big Ten championship. So I thought that they might be off and running the next year as well, but it just hasn't taken place. Now they have upgraded a quarterback, offensive coordinator, best transfer portal team in the Big Ten. You would think that they could possibly take off. Easier schedule too, Phil. No Michigan State, Ohio State on the schedule. They've been displaced by weaker teams in the Big Ten East.
Yeah, I agree. So, I mean, it's all there for Scott Frost. And did you scratch your head a little bit last year when he was still retained after that 3-9 season, his 4th straight losing season at Nebraska? Because I sure did. So that really puts him on the hot seat this year.
I think being a favored son may have brought him just 1 more year to get it done here. Phil, we've got Lawrence on the line. He's asking, what's Phil's take on Sparty? Tucker's a $95 million man, is making the Big Ten championship game a realistic goal for Michigan State.
Mel Tucker's a fellow Clevelander. We both went to Cleveland High School, so I always enjoy my conversations with him. And last year was a phenomenal year for Michigan State. Now, I just threw out that stat on Nebraska about them being plus 56 yards per game in Big Ten play. How about this stat? Last year, Michigan in Big Ten play was minus 63 yards per game. So that is more indicative of a 3-6 or 2-7 season. I think they overachieved last year, really did as good as they could. Remember the Michigan game, you thought they were dead in the water in the third quarter, and that they somehow rallied. They had a lot of fourth downs that they went for and converted on them. Any of those fourth downs got stopped, they probably would have lost. And in the end, they finished 11-2. I think this year's team defensively, big improvement. I mean, last year they gave up the most yards in college football throwing the football. They got 9 starters back there. Offensively, the big question is who's going to replace Kenneth Walker, but I think they're in good shape. Jaden Reed is one of the top receivers out there, and they've got a veteran quarterback. I just think after overachieving last year, they probably don't match the double-digit wins of last season. Big game for them might be at Penn State. Another one might be at Washington. But I see this team taking a step back. I've got them coming in 4th in the East this year, having to play Penn State on the road.
Yeah, Phil, the microcosm of the 2 teams we just went through, Nebraska, Michigan State, was when they actually played. Nebraska held Michigan State without a first down in the second half, but a punt return with about 2 to 3 minutes left saved Michigan State, sent the game to overtime. Adrian Martinez interception, and Michigan State pulls out a game that they should not have. So, yeah, just the microcosm of the way it went for both the Spartans and the Huskers last year. Nick's on the line, and he is asking for another team that was on my list in regards to intriguing teams. Miami in the ACC.
And I got to tell you, Mark, it is a pleasure talking to someone that follows the game like you do. And so that's a big plus for me, knowing that you watch these games probably as close as I do. So
I appreciate it.
that. But let's take a look at Miami this year. And first of all, I want to talk about Oregon. Oregon, I was going over the team with Coach Lanning. They are a deep squad. Cristobal did a fantastic job recruiting at Oregon. I bring that up because we're talking about Miami now. I expect he's going to do the same fantastic job, especially playing in the state of Florida like they are. I think he'll be able to recruit like this and build Miami much like he did Oregon. Now, when he took over at Oregon, he was taking over a finesse offense, and he had needed to turn them into a power team at the line of scrimmage, and he did just that. Well, talking to Coach Cristobal and going over his team this year, he likes what he inherited on the offensive line. He likes what he inherited on the defensive line, and he brought in some more players along both units to help out and add to it. So I think they're going to be strong at the line of scrimmage. They've got one of the best quarterbacks in college football in Tyler Van Dyke. They've got some dangerous receivers. The secondary looks good as well. I rated 13th best secondary in the country, and they're solid on special teams. Miami's got a tough schedule. They do have to play Texas A&M on the road. They also have to play Clemson on the road. But add it all up, I think it's final game of the season. They host Pitt. And I believe that's the one that's going to be for the ACC Coastal Division Championship. And I don't think it's going to take Mario Cristobal to get this team up there. And I know Miami's disappointed a lot of folks for a lot of years, but there's a new guy in charge right now, and I think Cristobal's got what he wants already. So I see them as my pick to win the ACC Coastal.
Every Miami coach post Butch Davis has not succeeded before or after their Miami stint. So they have never proven, none of them. Mark Richt aside, I think that's just a different situation. Unfortunately, we've seen after he stepped away from Miami, health reasons, and I just don't think he was in the prime of his career. So Mark Richt, obviously a tremendous coach at Georgia. But other than that, if you look through every other coach, none of them achieved at the Power 5 level before or after Miami. So a lot of bad coaching hires at Miami, but they probably got it right this time. At least a guy that proved at another Power 5 stop that he could win championships there in the Pac-12. We got Phil Steele on the line. Of course, it is the standard of college football preview magazine. So please, Phil, for those people that still want to get in under the wire and get your magazine, what do they need to do?
Well, it's interesting, Mark. We actually had to print the magazine in 2 parts this year due to a paper shortage. So the first part, we printed half the magazine run. We give it strictly to Barnes & Noble. So right now, I know if you're looking for the magazine, your best bet, go to your Barnes & Noble, pick up a magazine. That's your absolute best bet. Now, the second run was printed last week. It should hit the other stores probably in a week or so. Start hitting the other stores then. But right now, Barnes & Noble is your best bet. You can also go online and get it at philsteele.com. That's STEELE.com. When you do it that way, you do have to pay a mailing charge because it costs me money to mail these things. But you can get it that way if you don't have a Barnes & Noble in the area. And then you can also get the online version. And the interesting thing, Mark, is our deal with Learfield right now. They redid our online version where we can update it all the way through the start of the season. Example, Bill Clark, the head coach of UAB, is no longer there. He had unfortunately stepped down due to health concerns. We've got that changed in the online version. Christian Mahogany, the outstanding offensive lineman for BC's out for the year. We've got him circled in the magazine, corrected the write-up and our forecast and the offensive line for the magazine. So the digital version updated all the way through the start of the season. You can get that at philsteele.com, and also check out all the blogs we're putting up there as well. I'm going to have a different blog every day during the week for all the way through the start of the season.
That is phenomenal. Got to order early for next summer, folks. This takes months to digest. And then the great thing about it is, while I discard and I order a few other preview magazines, they generally get discarded once the season kicks off. This is a reference guide throughout the season. It has to be next to you while you're watching from noon to midnight on Saturday. It is a reference guide. Phil Will is asking, hey, Phil, do you think my Irish can win the Ohio State, Clemson, or USC games? I'm hoping we can win 2 out of those 3 to go 11-1.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, now the Ohio State game is going to be tough. I've got them a 2-touchdown underdog in that game, as does Vegas right now. The game's in Columbus. That, of course, makes it very difficult. But Clemson and USC, I rate both games as toss-ups. Generally, when I rate 2 toss-ups games, I figure you're going to win 1 and lose 1. If that's the case, they go 10-2. But really, I mean, the Clemson game is at home. The USC game is on the road. We'll have to see what kind of shape USC is in at the end of the season. They are my #1 most improved team, but maybe they'll have the Pac-12 title game on deck. And if that's the case, it may not be as important a game as winning the Pac-12 title game. We'll have to see what happens with USC. But yes, the opportunity is there, and I do rate both the Clemson and USC games as toss-ups, with the only game I have an underdog this year being Ohio State. Appreciate that, Will.
Phil, since we're on the subject of USC, I got to say it was a bit of a head scratcher on the surface for me, but I know that you've got an explanation. So I saw USC as, I believe, your #1 surprise team, coming off 4-8. I'm sorry, Phil. They were where?
#1 most improved team.
Yes, most improved team. Absolutely. Okay. 4-8 last year. So I would think that would rank them somewhere between 55 and 65 in your power poll. And they're number 28 this year. Most people are much higher on USC than that. Your thoughts about the Trojans?
Yeah, and Mark, like I explained, I go through a 3 write-through process with the magazine, and after the first write-through with USC, the postseason write-through, I had a middle of the road in the Pac-12, and then the next part of the write-through process was the pre-spring, which I bumped them up a little bit. And then finally, after talking to Coach Riley and going through the team with them, all of a sudden they had Caleb Williams at quarterback, Mario Williams, and a Blitnikoff winner, Jordan Addison, receiver, 1,000-yard rusher. Coach Riley told me he was happy about the offensive line. They brought in 13 transfers on defense. They went all the way up to my #1 most improved team by the end of the magazine. So it's a 7-month process. And like you, Mark, my initial reaction was, you know what, they're probably middle of the road in the Pac-12 South, maybe 4th. And they just started moving up as Coach Lincoln Riley kept bringing in the transfers. And his confidence level talking to them, I think they're going to have a very good year.
All right, Phil, we appreciate your time. Certainly here today. If you've got time for one more question.
Sure.
We've got one from Mike here. Will Ole Miss build off of their success from last year's 10-win season and transfer portal additions, or do they take a step back?
Yeah, the king of the transfer portal is Lane Kiffin, and I really think it's going to depend on the start of the season. I mean, they only have 12 returning starters, but I like Jackson Dart at QB. I like the running backs, Ulysses Bentley and Zach Evans. I like all the transfers he's brought in. And when you look at the Ole Miss schedule this year, they're going to be favored against Troy, Central Arkansas, at Georgia Tech, Tulsa, Kentucky, at Vanderbilt, and probably be favored at home against Auburn. This team could open up the season 7-0. Now, all those transfers that are come in will be fully acclimated to the offense and the defense. They're going to be playing with confidence. I would give them a shot at winning at LSU. I think LSU won't be as confident of a bunch at that particular moment. So I think that schedule played into the fact that I have Ole Miss tied for 3rd in the SEC West this year. And I think they do have that opportunity to get back to 10 wins, especially if they start off the season 7-0. Appreciate the question, Mike.
I could not have stated it any better than what Michael is stating here on the screen. He says, I have to say Phil's magazine is the equivalent of a media guide for every school in the country. That's how much homework he puts into it. We all that have been in media for years and years and years, Phil, remember the media guides when we would go to media day, in particular with me in the SEC for 7 consecutive years, and would come back with a stack of media guides that we would study. And yes, Phil's publication is that, and with the metrics and the calculations exponentially more than that. So it's outstanding. Phil Steele's college football preview. Here it is, the latest edition. And the first one was published in what year?
1995. So this is the 28th year for the magazine this year.
And if you put the figures together for 27 years, the most accurate of the college football preseason publications. Phil, we so much appreciate you stopping by. I know that you've got a lot going on and so many media stops. Thanks for making this one of yours.
Well, I appreciate it, Mark. And as I mentioned, I really enjoy talking football with somebody as knowledgeable as you in the sport. So it was a real pleasure for me today. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much, Phil. Take care. Have a great season. All right, Phil Steele, appreciate him coming on board to talk college football with us, and we're going to continue and narrow it from the national scale down to some Michigan football talk. Yes, we got Justin Rowe on the line from Blue by 90. Justin, how's it going today?
Doing well, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing just fine.
Good.
All right, coming fresh off of Big Ten Media Days, and I have to say, no, I did not see every coach, but I saw most of them. I DVR'd everything. I try to get to everything, as you well know. Haven't quite gotten to everyone, but I found there to be just an even greater level of coach speak out of everyone. And that's not always the worst thing. I know that they've got to say all the right things and talk of their teams. I get it, except for one Jim Harbaugh. Yes, it was a lot of coach speak, but there were some gems in there, or some peeks behind the curtain when it comes to Coach Harbaugh. And let's start with the quarterback situation. I don't know that he gave us a whole lot there, but I'm going to take him at his word that it is a flat out man versus man competition. We're going to let it fly and see who's the best quarterback when we get to week 1.
Well, first of all, can you get this red off of my screen real quick?
I was going to make mention. You may not like the that's one of the boys of college football colors, not dreaded team down south.
That's all right. Yeah, we'll deal with it today. I mean, but yeah, I think, I actually recorded a podcast last night with a reporter from Michigan, and I thought, and it was a guy that was at Media Days, and he said, and I thought it from watching it, Jim Harbaugh seemed very comfortable, and he's not always looking and sounding comfortable up on a podium. I think that he has gotten more and more just to be himself up there, and now, walking into Big Ten Media Days right now is probably the best time of his life, right? Every year for the past 7 years, it's been, you got to answer the question about Ohio State and how you're going to beat them and how you're going to do that. This time he gets to puff his chest out and talk about how they did beat them and go to the Big Ten championship. So I was, pretty impressed with how he handled himself and just, the confidence, and then his players as well. But jumping into the quarterback situation too, he's very cryptic with it. It was a classic Jim Harbaugh quote of his quarterback situation. It's been like that for every single year, even when you knew Shea Patterson was going to be the starter type of deal. But I think that's actually the truth this season, right? I think it really is a 1A, 1B type situation, because how do you sit the guy that brought you to your first Big Ten championship in 17 years? I really don't know how you can say, all right, we're just going to overpass you and go to the next guy. But then it's also at the same time, how do you overlook the talent that J.J. McCarthy brings in as well?
See, Justin, I hear so many fans say this, and some media people as well. And I just can't understand a scenario in which, let's say, or Jim Harbaugh knows in his heart of hearts, I want to start JJ McCarthy by the conclusion. I just think we can get to where we need to go with him.
Yeah.
Why would you even start Cade McNamara in week 1? He's going to make the right decisions. He's going to make the right reads. He's going to do the right things. They have easy opponents. How do you bench a guy that's 5-0 that's got like a 12-1 TD to pick ratio? You can't justify that.
That's where I think it's going to be so difficult, because I think that honestly, I think you're 100% right. I think if you want JJ McCarthy to be the starter by week 5, let's call it, then you have to have him be the starter coming out of camp and going into week 1, because they're going to run the ball 78 times against Hawaii and score 85 points, and Cade McNamara won't throw an incompletion possibly, And so I'm with you, and I think it's going to be that tough situation, but I do know what Jim Harbaugh loves, and that's a guy who manages and takes care of the ball, and that's Cade McNamara. And I just think, the only thing that I think could happen in those first few games is, what if they do a Brady and Henson and like split it up quarter by quarter or half by half, and all of a sudden JJ does get some meaningful snaps in those first 4 games and he just blows it out of the water. The ball's coming out of his arm 10 times as fast. He's making guys miss. That's what I think it would have to be a spectacular outing game after game for JJ McCarthy to take over that, if Cade McNamara is the guy going into week 1.
So, yeah, I think that's the way you got to approach it. Either you come out of camp saying JJ's the best, and it's got to be a situation where he actually proved it, or else you're trying to fool your players. Nobody knows outside, but you're trying to fool your players into thinking, when they're like, no, Cade actually ran the offense better in August camp. So you can't have that happen. Or you just say, you come out of August camp and say, man, still too tough to tell. Let's let them both go at it these first 3 or 4 weeks. Because the other point to my first scenario about starting Cade with the thought that JJ is going to be the guy in game 5 or game 6, you're also throwing him into the fire when the schedule ramps up in a hurry. You want to throw him in against, I know he doesn't get thrown in because he's got packages run for him and so forth. But in terms of being the starter that carries the entire game, all of a sudden he's facing an Iowa defense, a Penn State defense, without getting those reps.
And we kind of thought it last year too. I had the same thought. I was like, at some point, we all thought Cade was going to slip up at some point last year, and then JJ was going to get thrown in. And we thought that was going to be the case, like at Penn State when you're down 24-17 in the fourth quarter or something like that, and it didn't end up happening. But, it does feel like that's one of the only situations where JJ does take over, is if Cade stumbles and it's like a panic button type moment, and then you're not setting JJ up for success at all, So I really do want to see him, even if they're up by 30, get some meaningful reps in the first half, and not a one play at a time. I think he should be getting like one drive at a time in those first few games, just to see how he does command the offense. How does he lead them down the field? How does he go? Game in and game out. Thank you, Sue. Appreciate that. But I think it's one of those situations where it's win-win for Jim Harbaugh, right? I think, until it's lose-lose, because I think it's one of those things where, you don't want to get into a situation where you mind screwed both of them, and now you don't really know what the situation is. So it'll be interesting how it all plays out.
And one of the reasons why I go back to the earlier point about we must have an anti-Michigan crowd here. We usually have a pro-Michigan crowd. Right. I may have more Michigan followers than any other team in the country, but they're not showing up this morning. They'll catch you on the replay, but you're not going to feel the love immediately, Justin, here. So to go back to my initial point leading into Jim Harbaugh at Media Days, one of the reasons why I'm more apt to believe him is because the genuine enthusiasm about this team may even be better. The defense is a bunch of no names, but they might be better. All the things that he said that could be better, even better about this team, than last year is because Jim Harbaugh stood at that podium last year, and I watched the podium. I watched the side interview for 50 minutes with the media on the side. I watched the stay with the Big Ten Network guys. And what I remember what happening was last year, he gave us a lot of reasons to believe, but there was no proof there, of course. And then it came to fruition. And I thought he was very detailed last year to say, not just, hey, the team's coming together, we're gelling, we love each other, all those things that you hear all day from everyone. But he gave specific examples as to why the coaching staff challenged each other and they were a good mix, and all those examples. And it came to fruition.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that he was very methodical in how they wanted to do that type of thing. A lot of it was there's like culture change. He brought in the younger guys in terms of that coaching staff. They, as stupid as it sounds, they're playing music at practice, like those types of things. He was like, all right, what is it going to take to change the culture around here and get things more energized, get these guys going? And it did work. And I think he's feeling the same way right now from what I'm hearing from, I talk to players every single day here. I've talked to some of the coaches and they're enjoying life at Michigan right now, and as they should. But at the same time, I don't know if you caught, Eric All or Mozzie Smith or Cade McNamara at the Big Ten Media Days too, but they are not satisfied. It was not like we're coming in here, we're so proud of what we did last year and all that stuff. It's we're back and we're going to do it again type of deal. And that was not just a show for Big Ten Media Days. I've interviewed probably 20 guys over the past month or two here, and every single guy is like, we are in here. And they talk about the Georgia game much more than they talk about the Ohio State game. I'll tell you that right now. They talk about how they want to win the national championship, and they're ready. Not that you can bypass Ohio State and say, oh, we've accomplished that, we're ready for the next thing. But they want to take it to the next level and say, how do we beat an SEC team? Just the same way Ohio State's saying the same thing, and just about everybody in the country, right? So.
Yeah, what Justin just alluded to, the player interviews and the deep dive on Michigan football, one of the great reasons why you need to get on over to Blue by 90 podcast. You see it there on the screen. Follow Justin at JustinRowe92. Again, Blue by 90 podcast. They upload twice a week, Mondays and Fridays, Michigan football talk. Just small things that Jim Harbaugh said gave me confidence, that backed his confidence in his team. Just saying things like, I schedule less things. This team manages itself. I schedule less things. They used to be like, Coach, I had to say, and they were good. They would follow my instructions before, but now they're coming to me saying, we started this, we're doing this, we're lifting more, or whatever it is.
Yeah. And I'll tell you this right now, from what I have gathered from this team too, is they are incredibly mature and good human beings as well. It's really apparent. It is every single guy walks into the room and they are they're polite. They aren't, we all know how 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, when they get in the limelight, can be, right? And that's just not this team. And so I think they, having guys that, COVID has made it so that there's 6-year guys that are going, that are coming back, and they are leading this team. And I think that was one of the worries that everyone had. Like, okay, without Aiden Hutchinson, how do you have that leadership type deal, right? But it was actually it was a reload type of situation. There are guys that are stepping up to the plate that are being awesome in terms of leadership. And Cade McNamara is one of those. And actually, who was it? Mike Sainristil came out and said, and Mike Sainristil is a guy that switched from the wide receiver position now to the DB position. He said, people talk about Aiden Hutchinson, but nobody talks about Josh Ross, being the leader of this last year's defense. They said he was just as vocal in the locker room and doing everything as Aiden Hutchinson was, but he just wasn't Heisman guy, so he didn't get the love. So how do you replace those guys? But everyone said they're coming into their own. They're doing their own thing. They're not trying to be Aiden Hutchinson. Nobody can be Aiden Hutchinson, right? But it's different. It's mature. They're good human beings, and they are here for the right reasons too. In the year of 2022, in NIL and transfer portal, you would think that guys are like, when NIL deals happen, they're pissed off or they're like, where's my check and that type of thing. I've been around these guys at multiple big-time NIL deals with the full team. Everybody's pumped for other people. They're happy. Everyone knows Blake Corum deserves what he's getting, and JJ and Cade and whoever else it is. And they're happy for it. A couple of the linemen that I've talked to, they're like, yeah, we get a check, here and there for sure, but we're here to win football games. And if we do what we're supposed to, we'll get paid down the road too. So they're here for a different, different kind of meaning, and they're here for a different reason. And it's exciting, I think, from a fan's perspective to hear that in the year 2022.
We'll pick off a question here from Will. It says, how much more is Michigan going to pass with a healthy Ronnie Bell compared to the end of last year? And that shouldn't be discounted. Ronnie Bell's almost like a transfer portal edition.
He kind of is. Yeah. You honestly, at the end of last year with how good that offense was, they're scoring 40 points a game throughout the year. And it's like, they didn't have their quote unquote best receiver. You forget about it a little bit. Now, will they pass more just because of that? I don't know if it's just because of Ronnie Bell, because that wide receiver room is actually pretty loaded. To be honest, you've got Roman Wilson, you've got Cornelius Johnson. You're adding a Darius Clemens as a freshman that's going to be a stud. You're adding a Morion Walker. You've got AJ Henning, who's going to flip-flop between running back a little bit. He's going to play the wide back position and get out in the slot. And then so is Donovan Edwards is going to get out in the slot. So the reason why I'd say that they're going to pass more is not just because of Ronnie Bell, but it's because of all those weapons. And you combine that with Matt Weiss being the quarterback's coach as now the calling plays as the offensive coordinator. They're going to throw the ball a little bit more.
There were a couple of Ohio State connections that were asked of Jim Harbaugh. He didn't come out and initiate them, but one in particular, I'm sure you've caught a backlash on it and commented because I actually went back after I heard the close of Jim Harbaugh's side session. So it was pretty mundane 50 minutes until the last 90 seconds. Then all of a sudden somebody hit him with, the reference to some people are standing on third base. They think they hit a triple. Yep. Was that referencing Ryan Day? Well, he was first asked about his relationship with Ryan Day. He didn't have much to say at all, except we were at the Heisman Trophy presentation. We were cordial. And his team wants to beat my team. My team wants to beat his team. So that gave us next to nothing, except for maybe we can read into, there's no relationship or not a good one. And then, of course, then the follow-up to what was stated at the end of the news conference following the win over Ohio State. I went back and watched it just to make sure. And just based on the questioning and the comments prior to that comment, you knew exactly what and who he was talking about, because just prior to that, he was talking about all the Ohio State rhetoric about what they were going to do to Michigan. Well, it obviously played right into it. So I just found it kind of funny that he gets hit with that again, has a big grin kind of come across his face, as no comment, and bolts.
Yeah. I think, isn't that what you want the Ohio State and the Michigan coach to be doing to each other? That's what makes it great, and I think it's perfect. Can they be civil? Is it the same with Jim Harbaugh and Mel Tucker? They'll shake hands and probably have a little small talk, but they shouldn't be best friends. I think that goes against everything that the rivalry is for, so I love it, honestly. And I think Jim Harbaugh has gotten a little bit petty now that he finally beat Ohio State. And there's a little bit of I can do that type of thing. I'm going to go out and we're going to do it again type of situation. So, to me, there's like a little bit of an edge to Jim Harbaugh now that's almost going back to like 2015 or San Francisco 49ers Jim Harbaugh, that as a Michigan fan you should love. That's the best Harbaugh that you can get as a coach. It's when he's a weirdo and like stirring the pot and all in it. Like that's when he's at his best. It's a bad thing, I think, if he goes into the shadows a little bit.
And then the other comment was about NIL and Michigan fans that have been disgruntled about the NIL situation at Michigan and the lack of initiative, or assumed the lack of initiative based on what's happening on the surface. Jim Harbaugh lays out very much that this is a great destination for NIL. We don't focus on it, but it's a great destination. It takes care of itself. They're focused on football. They reap the benefits of that. And then Ohio State's brought up specifically about the $13 million comment from Ryan Day of maintaining his roster. And Jim Harbaugh says, well, I think we're Michigan. We could double that.
Yeah. And I think that's like, if we're being honest, I think that's Jim Harbaugh doing a Nick Saban cryptic message to the boosters of, hey, let's double those checks that you're writing right now, and I think that he's not wrong. First of all, why not? Why couldn't Michigan? They've got a huge alumni base. But I think it was he's all in on NIL and getting things going. And I think his response there was more so, I want to get these guys paid. I want to get it going. I want to be able to compete with Ohio State, even if it's in a different, like, not pay for play type scenario. I think he still wants to be competitive, and he wanted to show the world like he's willing to do all that right now.
Justin, I want to respect your time, so just let me know when you need to go. The Rod Favre is asking, how much is Harbaugh trying to leave for the NFL hurting Michigan's recruiting right now? And I apologize for leaving you for a second looking over here, but I was scrolling through trying to find Michigan's recruiting ranking, and I knew it was I passed it, and number 33, everyone, by the way. So what are your thoughts? We've talked about it in recent weeks, but your thoughts about that connection?
Yeah, I think it definitely hurt them at the time. I think there was a little bit. I don't think it's hurting Michigan as much as people think. I think there are a lot of other factors that are going into it. And I would say most of it is NIL. And it's just the Wild West, and people are dropping bags everywhere. And it's the recruiting landscape has changed, a ton. It's no longer about, hey, here's, our campus, here's all this stuff. A lot of it is just, what's the number type of situation. So I think that's affecting that's affecting Michigan's recruiting more than anything. But what I will say right now is, a month ago, not even, they were at 55. Now they're at 33. They've got the barbecue in the big house this weekend, and I think they're going to jump up into the 20s, to be honest, because if I had to guess, they're going to get some commitments from some big time, possibly even a 5-star, as well as some 4-stars. So I think that Michigan, if I had to guess, is going to end up in like the 15 to 20 range for recruiting, which obviously you'd hope that they're top 10, but I don't think 15 to 20 is anything to say, oh, the sky is falling, right?
Yeah, each recruiting class is a big deal, but you got to stack them so one drop to 13 in the country is not the end of the world. Riley, we appreciate your question there, but Justin already hit on the quarterback situation, so just watch the complete conversation. I got one last thing for you, Justin, if you've got 2 minutes, and that would be about camp. And just in regards to your outlook on the team, what do you think needs to be accomplished? What is maybe a sore spot that you would like to see addressed? Obviously, the information is going to be difficult to get, but what would you hope is being addressed?
Yeah, I think one thing that was interesting from Jim Harbaugh at the Big Ten Media Days, too, was that he said that he thinks the defense is going to be better. Obviously, you lose Mike McDonald and you bring in a Jesse Minter, who was at Vanderbilt. We've talked about this, probably the worst team in America in terms of Power 5. But it's tough because they don't have the talent that Michigan has. But I think with what they lost on defense, it would be really tough to see that they were going to be better on defense. But I think it's more so talking about the defensive, backs. the passing defense and things like that, where they struggled at times last year. But they've got some vets. You know, you lose Daxton Hill, you lose Brad Hawkins, but they've got a Will Johnson coming in as a 5-star. They've got some guys that are going to step up. So I think it's a sore spot, but it's something that I would love to see them take strides. And I think Steve Klingscale, one of the co-defensive coordinators up there, is really going to take a step up. You know, one other thing that I think is people aren't talking about with Michigan enough is, yes, you reload with talent on the offensive side of the ball, but you lose Josh Gaddis and your offensive coordinator. Yes, you're installing mostly the same offense, right, with Matt Weiss and Sherrone Moore, but you've got 2 new play callers that haven't called plays much, and they're going to have to try and figure out, their rhythm as well. So I think that would be a sore spot. I would say that, like, it just needs to figure out. And I know that they're going to be doing that. You know, they've been doing it all spring, all summer, and they're going to do it in fall camp. But with play calling, you really can't get a vibe for play calling until you're in the middle of a game in the second quarter or the third quarter, and are we run and run? Are we passing? Or, what are we doing here? So that would be something I think to watch out for Michigan here.
Follow Justin at Justin Row 92, as you see on the screen there on Twitter, and there is no way in hell you're going to see his name again on Twitter in red. So catch it right there. We'll do it right. We'll clean it up. We'll have it in the fine maize and blue the next time we see you, Justin. Appreciate you being here.
Appreciate it. Yep. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Justin.
See ya.
All right. We keep it going here. More college football talk. We got our buddy Ty on the line. Ty, it's been a while.
What is going on, Mark? How you doing, man?
I am doing just fine. Catch Ty at Ty Hudson 83 on Twitter. Hogville Net. Tell us about it. What's going on there?
Yeah, man. So I had to rebrand a lot of the Hog fans who found me through your channel. Remember Pig Trail Network. I had to rename it, rebrand the channel to Tuss Talk with Ty. Because of an affiliation that Hogville, who I also now work for, has an affiliation with Pig Trail Nation, which is a segment on TV around here. So there was a little bit of a, I had to change the name. It was too confusing, and obviously there's a conflict there. So I changed it to Tuss Talk. But yeah, I'm with Hogville.net. We've got guys in Razorback media, fans know well, Otis Kirk, Dudley Dawson, Kevin McPherson. It's, big names, guys that do great work. And I'm really thrilled to be a part of that team. We've already been spitting out some content. In fact, later today, Kevin McPherson and I are supposed to do an interview discussing Razorback basketball. They had their first kind of open to the media practice. So we're going to discuss what we saw there. So yeah, or what he saw there rather.
Leave your comments and questions, everyone. We will pass them along to Ty on Arkansas football. So we made it through SEC Media Days last week. Fall camp's coming up next week. Recruiting's always going on. What has your attention right now?
Well, the fact that they've darn near filled up this class, Mark. I'm sure you've kept an eye on it a little bit. They're already at 23 commits. And what's crazy is it's not just the 4-stars that you should be taking a good hard look at. They've got some 3-star guys that wouldn't shock me during the next bump that they get some, maybe not another star necessarily, but they get a little bit of a bump. But guys like Dallas Young, who you and I have talked about a little bit, Quincy Rhodes. They got this running back out of Naples, Florida. This kid got a bump on 247, not their composite, but 247. Isaiah Augustive, I think is how you pronounce his last name, but he got a bump. He's a 4-star, but on their composite, he's still a 3-star. But the kid has tree trunks, Mark. He's just built. He looks like an NFL back, and he's just now going into his senior season. He looks ready to go, 6'2", 200 pounds. Great burst as soon as he has the ball in his hands. I mean, he looks fantastic. I'm a little surprised other recruiting services haven't caught up. I don't know what they're doing, Mark, but this kid looks fantastic. But they've got several of those guys. TJ Metcalf, a safety out of Alabama. I think he's 6'2", about 190. You just kind of go down this entire list. They've got another guy that I'm really big on. Otis Kirk and I talked a lot about him, and Otis is just blown away by this kid out of Oxford, Mississippi, this linebacker, 6'3", 240-pound Alex Sanford. This dude is a beast. He, again, you talk about the look. He passes the look test. I mean, again, 6'3", 240 is nothing to take lightly, and Alex looks the part. His film is fun to watch. Could be another one of those guys that get a bump, but he's right now, of all the 3 stars, he's probably one of my favorite when you're talking about the 247 composite. But yeah, this 23 class right now, it's 12th in the country. Fans get a little huffy when I tell them I've got them probably finishing just outside the top 20, somewhere between 21, 25 when the dust settles in February. But they're in great shape. This class is honestly, from top to bottom, pretty impressive so far. And they're going to add more. I think they're going to end up with maybe 2 more. We know there's one they're waiting on, and maybe there's 1 or 2 more. They're kind of in a wait and see mode right now. The staff is.
Mr. TW, appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for the contribution. Double-digit wins for the Hogs. Tusk Talk with Ty is great stuff.
Appreciate that.
Where can people find that?
YouTube, Tusk Talk with Ty. It's still there. It's yeah, just a slight name change. Unfortunately, I can't change the URL. So if you look up Pig Trail Network, you will still find me. But yeah, it's switched. The logo switched. It was such a process. But I'm glad I did it. I had a friend of mine do the artwork. She did a fantastic job. So shout out to Ashley. She did a wonderful job with the new logo, and yeah, it all worked out really well.
Connor Johnson is taking a shot at your baseball team.
Well, where was yeah, we had a good year, Connor. We at least made it to the College World Series this season. So, for the 11th time, I think we're doing just fine. But he's got a good point. That's always a good one. That's always a good one when you're talking about our baseball.
Michael, he's got a question for you, Ty. I have to ask who is going to be the primary targets for KJ Jefferson and also running the ball for the Razorbacks.
That's a good question. That's kind of the $1 million question. I put out a video on Hogville Net and I called it red flags. That triggered some folks, Mark. I'm not going to lie to you, but I think the fact that we, until we see it on the field, we just don't know what we have at wide receiver. Jaden Hazelwood, yeah, former 5-star. I get it. Big time transfer out of Oklahoma. But in that offense, didn't produce great numbers, okay numbers. He led them in a couple of categories. But the question is, can he fit in this offense? If you look at Kendall Briles, the last 2 years, it's kind of like it's been Treylon Burks or absolutely nobody else. Those are the facts. It was Treylon Burks, who was a first-round pick to the Titans, who's proven a lot of people wrong, by the way, right now. Go Treylon Burks. We're rooting for you, even though I can't stand the Titans. But, yeah, the question is who's going to be the guy. And there's promise, a lot of talent there. There is. The talent is there. But we've seen this before where we have, the tight end room or the wide receiver room or somewhere on defense, and then it still struggles through the year. I think it's maybe red flag was too harsh. It's just a question mark, and until I see it happen, I just truly don't know what they have there. If I had to guess, I feel like it's probably going to be maybe Katron Jackson, former 4-star wide receiver out of Texas. He'll be a true sophomore. Warren Thompson, all the promise in the world, Mark. I've talked about him so much. In fact, you and I, it's kind of a joke at this point how often I bring him up. He's got butterfingers. The guy had 17 drops last year. I mean, and then you talk about a great incoming class at wide receiver, Isaiah Centenia, 4-star down the road from me here in Fayetteville, speedy little track star. I actually had him on Pig Trail and interviewed him. Smart kid, good head on his shoulders, really excited about what he could do. Speedster, going to be a great slot receiver, could probably line up anywhere. Quincy McAdoo, another 4-star. Samuel Bakke, 6'3", like 210, 215. After he catches the ball, it's like, good luck. I mean, I'm not saying he's Treylon Burks. He doesn't have that, I mean, the kind of game speed that Treylon Burks had, we thought he'd be a little faster in the combine, and he wasn't. But he's got game speed. Maybe Samuel has that, but I couldn't really see that on film. But what I did see was great awareness when he has the ball in his hands, his ability to break tackles. He's a lot. He's a lot to deal with after he has the ball in his hands. So, yeah, I mean, it's a loaded question right now because we just don't know. The ceiling is high, but we just haven't seen it all put together yet. The spring camp didn't really do much to, change my mind there, but I do think someone will emerge. Who that is, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it is Warren Thompson. I don't know. Maybe it is Hazelwood. I don't know, but that's a good question. It's one we'll just have to wait and see. What was his other question? I'm sorry.
I think that was pretty much it. It was running backs, wide receivers.
Okay, running backs. Okay. That's where I get my prediction. You were probably going to ask me this later. I apologize if I'm ruining it for you. I had them at 9-3. That's my too early prediction. The reason why, arguably the best offensive line, maybe one of the top 3 offensive lines in the SEC when you're talking about just pure run blocking. They got 4 out of their 5 guys back up front. Left tackle is another red flag. They don't know what they're doing there. They're moving a Notre Dame transfer, Luke Jones, who's always been a primary interior guy, moving him out to left tackle. I don't know if that sticks. If I'm a Hog fan, I'm a little concerned about what's going on at left tackle, but still a great run blocker and potentials through the ceiling, right? When you're talking about where he was at in the interior, or at least I thought he would be. Running backs are just loaded. It's just loaded. Rocket Sanders, big. I think he's added a little bit of weight. I could be wrong. Dominic Johnson's added some weight. This guy put on like 15 pounds in the offseason. He's 6. I'd have to pull up the roster. I think he's like 245 or something at I don't remember his height. I'm mixing their measurements all up. And then they have AJ Green, who's a track star. Guy is just a speedster. I highly recommend people go and watch what film is out there on him. He's a speedster. I mean, as soon as he has the ball in his hands, it's like, good luck. He has a couple of nice plays against A&M and I think Texas. He was a freshman. Him and Rocket were both freshmen last year. They're just loaded in the backfield, Mark. It's kind of ridiculous to think that it feels like the old days, the Houston Nutt, and then maybe a little of the Petrino era. Of course, you had, Ronnie Wingo, Nile Davis, guys like that, but Michael Smith. But it kind of reminds you the old days of Houston Nutt, Brett Bielema, right? I mean, Alex Collins, Jonathan Williams. Reminds you of that. You have that that level of backfield. So, yeah, they're absolutely loaded. And their offensive line, good luck. I mean, number 1 rushing offense a year ago in the SEC, and they're only going to get better this year.
Cincinnati's week 1, correct?
Yeah. Cincinnati's week 1. Yep.
Don't know exactly why David's jumping to the BYU game, but I'll put it all together to say, it's not enough to play in the SEC Western Division. And then in addition to Missouri, which is a fairly light crossover game that's every year, the other games against, is it South Carolina this year?
It's South Carolina. Yeah, South Carolina is the SEC East. And, of course, they got Mizzou, who they play every year. And
so Arkansas is a better team on paper than BYU and Cincinnati, in my opinion. However, so they're not out there playing Ohio State or Notre Dame, but those are 2. Most teams play 1. Those are 2 difficult games, and certainly not gimmies or layups by any stretch.
It's going to be tough. This is, once again, the toughest schedule. I thought that 2020, of course, you only played 10 games in the SEC, but I thought that 2020 schedule, I still mark that down as probably one of, if not the toughest schedules ever. I mean, you had to play Georgia and Florida in a year, and I get it. Florida ended up not being elite, but they were still pretty good that year. Of course, Georgia's Georgia. That was a tough year. And then you fast forward to a full 12-game schedule in 2022. You start off with Cincy. That's already, they're not going to be as good as they were a year ago. I don't know where they end up when the dust settles. They still probably are going to finish something with double-digit wins. Wouldn't shock me at all. It's going to be a tough game. But then you have Missouri State, who's the head coach there? Oh, I don't know. A guy who probably has a dadgum chip on his shoulder after Arkansas fired him, Mr. Bobby Petrino, whose offenses back in the day were upper echelon. It's how he ended up with the Atlanta Falcons. He's produced All-Americans, Heisman candidates. I mean, you name it. And that's what you've got to deal with in Missouri State. That's supposedly your easiest game, Mark. Arkansas should win that by 3 scores, but we'll see. And then you've got, like you mentioned, BYU at BYU. That's going to be tough. Looking at them, they've also had some changes. They have Mitt Romney's son is a wide receiver there, and they've got a couple other pieces there that are pretty nice on offense. That's going to be a handful. And then you have Hugh Freeze and Liberty, Mark. I mean, I don't know that it gets tougher than that. This might surpass, as far as preseason looks, this might surpass that 2020 schedule. It's brutal. And on top of the fact that, you still got to play A&M down in Arlington. Of course, you've got Bama. Auburn is still Auburn. I mean, hell, they beat Arkansas even when they're terrible. That's just the truth of it. Arkansas always struggled. Doesn't matter who the head coach is there. Tommy Tuberville to Gus Malzahn, Gene Chizik, you name it. It doesn't matter. Good or bad, they just struggle against Auburn. Or they just flat out get cheated against, even though they technically won the game in 2020. But whatever, bygones are bygones. This is a tough schedule, and you still have LSU. They're under new management, Ole Miss, and then you close the year out on the road against Mizzou. I think this is going to end up surpassing that 2020 schedule. It's just week to week. There are no real off weeks outside of Bobby Petrino and his guys.
Ty Hudson, Hogville. Get on over there. Check out Ty's work, and you can follow him on Twitter. There you see Ty Hudson 83. So this is the time of year everybody's excited. Vanderbilt fans are excited. Everybody gets excited because you just want to see football, and you've got some glimmer of hope. So for years, you just had to have a glimmer of hope. And even going into last year, knowing, hey, man, this is really cool that we looked good last year. We were only 3-7, but we were much better than that. Man, we got something going. There's hope. Last year was the proof that, okay, we're good. We won games. We beat good teams. We are good. So this is there has to be a different sense of anticipation that is new for you and Arkansas fans that you haven't felt since fill in the blank a long time.
Probably since post, and again, I hate bringing up his name over and over, but Brett Bielema, that year 2, they weren't supposed to accomplish what they accomplished in year 2. And I can remember the rhetoric then was, oh, they're ahead of schedule. They're ahead of schedule. That's what's going on here. They're going to be great. And then that year 3, they did end up delivering, and that was a pretty good squad. Some questionable losses, yes, but still was a pretty good season. It kind of reminds me of that a little bit, although nothing against BA, former Purple Dog alumni and backup at Cincinnati, Mr. Brandon Allen. You feel better about what's going on at quarterback. You feel better about what's going on with the offensive line, and that's, you think about who was in charge then. That was Sammy Pitty, and the offensive line. That's your guy. That's your head coach. Offensive line is going to be year 3 under him. Come on, man. I mean, Kennedy's killing it as an O-line coach. It's like there's a lot of parallels. I draw a lot of parallels to that year 3, and this hype is similar, but I think it might even be beyond that. I have them at 9-3. I couldn't tell you what my prediction was going into year 3 under Bielema, but I mean, there's fans, and listen, every fan base does it after you have a year like what you had, and then you consider what you have coming back, and then you look at the transfer portal. Every fan base does it, but there's folks in my live chats. By the way, I'm going to do a live chat tonight, going to do a live show. Most people have them between 9 and 10 wins, or 8 to 10 wins is about the average. And that's pretty exciting. Arkansas is a baseball school. I've said that for years. Sometimes I get flack for it. I don't really care. They are. The baseball program is through the roof. You look at the attendance, they've almost every week, no matter the opponent, they're filling that stadium up down at Baum. But to have a year where you're coming off 9 wins, you beat Penn State in a any bowl game's important, but you beat them in that bowl. The hype is just to be expected. I hope they deliver, because Razorback fans have been through a lot. I mean, going all the way back to the Petrino motorcycle, blonde on the back of the bike, I think he got his ass whooped, but that's between me and chat here. I don't think that he actually wrecked his bike. I think the boyfriend caught up and gave him the old what for. But and then you go back to the John L. Smith, the disappointment of Bielema and the fall of what happened there, his final year at Arkansas, Chad Morris, and then you get gift wrap someone like Sam Pittman and not even realize what you have when they hire him. And maybe I'm biased in saying this, but I don't know if there's another fan base that deserves this kind of excitement, right? Everything they've been through, I don't know, man. The last decade's been rough, and it's very fitting. 10 years ago is when all this unfolded. Here we are, and you know what? The grass does look greener on the other side of the hill, and it looks like they could be pretty good. Like I said, I got them at 9-3. A lot of potential here. Could be a really exciting season, and fans deserve to be excited. Yeah, they're excited about baseball because we're baseball. Basketball, oh my God, Mark, number 2 class in the country, so much talent, a lot of excitement around basketball, but it's good to see football. It's good to see that excitement return. I'm down the road here in Springdale. You can feel the buzz even today in Fayetteville. You could feel it. It's in the air, Mark. It's fabulous. It has a nice aroma to it. It's just fantastic.
All right. I'd love to catch some of that aroma down there in Hogland. Okay. I'm looking at the Arkansas schedule. First, we want to acknowledge Mr. TW again, BYU Bicycle College. Their players are almost AARP.
God bless live chats. That's all I'm going to say.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. Arkansas's got one of those schedules that, unlike most teams where I can categorize definite wins, definite losses, then we got the 4 that I got to figure out. I got to figure out a lot of this schedule because everybody's going to say Alabama's a loss, including me. Mm-hmm. However, Alabama usually loses 1 game. Why can't that be on the road in Fayetteville?
So they lost on the road last year to Texas A&M, who Arkansas beat. And if you remember that first half, Arkansas absolutely dominated A&M. I don't know if you have any A&M fans in chat. They dominated. I think they got up to like a 17-0 lead.
Yep.
And KJ gets hurt. And then A&M's able to kind of catch up a little bit. Arkansas was better than A&M a year ago. Arkansas lost to Bama. Now, Bama kept control of that game. There's no you got to pull your fandom back a little bit. Alabama was in no threat of losing that game to Arkansas last year, but it was still a close game. And they ended up with I think they won by 7. They've got to come to Fayetteville. And if everything works out, Mark, if they, let's say they beat Cincy, South Carolina, Missouri State, I'll even say if they lose a close game to A&M, a lot of people have hopped on that bandwagon with A&M this year. I don't know what it is they're seeing that I'm not. I think A&M will be better than a year ago, but I don't know how much better. I think there's still questions at quarterback and some other places. But let's say they do lose that game. Okay, you're still sitting at 1-2, you're 3-1. And you have potentially the number 1, number 2 team in the country that is Alabama. Fans feel like they have a shot. It could be record attendance. Now, if they beat A&M, it's going to be a record attendance because you're probably, preseason, I don't know where Arkansas is going to be, but they'll probably be at that point with those wins. They're going to be top 10. Yeah, it'll be capacity. It's going to be wild. You've had 2 former Alabama quarterbacks admit that Fayetteville at capacity, I think when they both played, admitted that Arkansas was one of the toughest environments they had played in. It's going to be crazy. And, of course, they've got that north end zone renovation. It looks a lot prettier than it did before. And you've got a few thousand more folks over there. It's going to be wild. It's going to be a wild environment. Hell, that Cincinnati game is going to be wild. South Carolina is going to be wild, but it's not going to touch. It's not even going to – it won't be anything like what you'll see with Alabama when they come to town. I think there is a possibility that Arkansas can get that win. I think it's on the table. But we still have a lot of questions left. Like I said, if anyone hasn't already, go watch my red flags video. Even if you disagree, I think there's some pretty decent points made. I hate to pat myself on the back. I'm not that kind of guy, but I think there are some things, that could happen that could be pretty bad. And those are 5. I think I listed 4 or 5 reasons. I can't remember them all. Those things could happen and they could outshine the positive. And then you're in a little bit of a cluster. But Arkansas is in a really good position this year to maybe get an upset or 2 under their belt this year. And maybe one of those is Alabama. And like you said, it seems like they always lose one of those, or at the very least struggle. Last year, they struggled against Florida. They struggled against Arkansas. They had a couple other games that were questionable.
Auburn.
Yeah,
quite a few.
Exactly. And they lost one to A&M. And so maybe this year it's Arkansas. Maybe this year they travel to Fayetteville and they go home. They go back to Tuscaloosa with holding an L. I hope that's the case. I still have it as a loss like you, but anything could happen.
Ty, what is so odd about A&M for me? And are they the number one target for Arkansas? Are they the number one rival? Would most Hog fans say, is it Texas A&M? Is it LSU? Once we get to 2024, is it going to be Texas?
Oklahoma?
And Missouri's the designated. No. I know better.
No, that is the most manufactured rivalry I've ever seen. Mizzou fans are all about it. Arkansas fan, I've never met a Hog fan, and I've met a lot of them, being right here in NWA. I've never heard anyone, I hope we get Mizzou this year, Ty. I've never heard that.
Well, you can understand Mizzou fans because they are the least of the members of the SEC. Let's just face it. Vandy would be because they're the worst program, but Vandy's been in the SEC forever, so they are true SEC. Mizzou is just kind of geographically, they're on the edge.
Yeah.
They're obviously not a great impact. They're an okay football program. They have no existing rivalries with anyone. They are the least member of the SEC. I hate to say it for any Missouri fans. That's not a knock on your program. You had nothing to do with it. It's just the way it is.
I'll do it. I'll knock on their program. It's crap. They're crap. There was an article last week. I think someone asked Drinkowitz about, are they getting kicked out of the SEC? I think it was him, right? That was at someone in chat will have to help me out with that. They don't belong here, Mark. They don't belong here. I don't care that they have beaten Arkansas. I don't care. Congrats. You beat us during the worst stretch of our program's history. And yeah, they beat the snot out of us in a bowl game, whatever, X amount of years ago when we didn't have Houston Nutt as a head coach. He was let go and they'd hired Bobby Petrino, right? Congrats. That's your mantle. You still don't belong here. And look, people could have said the same thing about Arkansas football the last several years, and that's fine up until last year. But they've proven that no, they do belong. Most fans will tell you it's LSU. Most fans will tell you the rivalries with LSU. There've been some great games, Miracle on Markham and whatnot, 1 and 2. They've had some great games over the years, but LSU doesn't view Arkansas as a rival. I just don't. And I've talked with several LSU fans. I've had them in my DMs. I've talked to them openly here and there. Talked to a couple of their media folks several years back. No one down there cares about Arkansas. That's just the facts. For a rivalry to be something, both teams have to have an absolute hatred of each other. I would say, for me personally, I would argue that A&M is the bigger rivalry. You go back to the Southwest Conference those days, and Arkansas kind of had their number, and back and forth. A&M did too as well. And then you look at this stretch. I mean, they went how many years with A&M beating them, even in years where you thought Arkansas was the better team. A&M had this stretch of wins against Arkansas. I would argue that it's A&M in football. But most fans here will tell you LSU. Why? I don't know. Again, great games down in Little Rock. I've just never viewed that as a rivalry. I like making fun of the whole corn dog situation. That's one I don't know if you know that one, but we'll do corn dogs. I'll pop up a corn dog on my screen when Arkansas is about to play LSU because it's all fun. It's fun to hate on LSU. It is because they're easy to make fun of. Let's be honest. But but I respect LSU. I really do, and their fans just don't really care much for Arkansas as far as like a respect level, right? They don't view Arkansas as a real rival. I think A&M fans probably do view Arkansas a little bit more of a rival than LSU does, and that just speaks to the history.
Well, the SEC was telling us something when they made this a neutral site game, because that only happens with like 3 or 4 other games in the country: Texas, Oklahoma, Florida, Georgia. So that's telling us one thing. That my one quick comment on Texas A&M, because we're running out of time, would be, I just have an issue with Texas A&M and trying to figure out what they're going to do this year, because on the plus side, they should be ready to take that next step. This is year 5 for Jimbo Fisher. He's a national championship winning coach coming in, having the Brinks truck backed up to his driveway and all that money dumped on his head, and this phenomenal recruiting class. And I know that it's year 1 for them, and we can't expect the impact to be in year 1 as freshmen, but it's year 5. But on the downside, so all the off the field indicators are that this they should be ready. They've built up to this, the recruiting, the money, the resources, everything's there. But on the field, it's much of their front 7, which was one of the best in the SEC, if not the country's gone. They got a quarterback situation, unproven situation. I know Max Johnson is a capable quarterback, but if they've got to go to him, that's what they've got: a capable quarterback, not a difference maker. And they've been bad at wide receiver for the last few years, and their best wide receiver just had an issue where he was suspended for SEC Media Days, so who knows what's going to happen to him. And they lost their best running back and playmaker in Isaiah Spiller. So all the off-the-field indicators say they're primed to make a move, but on the field, I don't think this is their year.
They're, of course, they bring in this number 1 class. And that's the only takeaway that I get when I look around, is that, oh, well, they're I think someone has had them as high as like 4th in the country. And I'm sure they're going to be preseason top 5, top 10. And I'm like you, I don't understand it. But what I keep finding is, oh, well, they had this great class. Maybe the greatest, well, it is the greatest class in the modern era of recruiting. It's the greatest class on paper that we've ever seen. That's why you think they're top 5 team. Listen, if you're having to rely on true freshmen, I don't care if they're 3, 4, or 5 stars. If you're having to rely on true freshmen to come in and do something great and make you something more than what you were, that speaks more to about your depth and your quality depth. Mark, my saying, quality depth matters. That's right. And I don't know that A&M, we know they recruit well, but like you've said, we've not seen it. The product on the field has been average. He's had a couple of decent, obviously that win over Bama last year was huge. And that was a confidence builder for them. But you can't tell me that, listen, I'm putting them in the top 5 because of their incoming freshman class. I've never heard of that. That's wild to me. Again, if you're having to rely on your incoming freshman class to come in and do something, you've got more problems than you realize. And yeah, looking at their recruiting class, they've brought in some absolute studs. There's no doubt that Connor Wigman, that quarterback, that dude's he probably will be legit. But when is he going to come in this year? Like you said, they've got questions at quarterback. So you're going to rely on a true freshman quarterback? Possibly. I don't know. Maybe there's an A&M fan in the audience that can answer this for me or answer it for us. I don't know what it is. Would I put them in the top 15? Yeah, I probably would. They're A&M. Jimbo has at least proven that they have it in them to be something, right? You don't beat Bama and be nothing, right? You don't beat Bama and be an absolute garbage program. Maybe I'd put them in the top 15 or at least the top 20, but I cannot justify a top 5, maybe even not even a top 10. I don't see it. There's too many question marks. Like you said, they've lost so much off their defense. Their front 7 has just been obliterated. I don't know. Yeah, they'll probably tell you, well, we're restocking with better talent. But we hear that every 2 years over there. We hear that every 2 years. And what have they really done? What do they have to show for it? I don't know. Again, maybe an A&M fan can help us out with that. But I think I have a hard time putting A&M in front of Arkansas right now in the SEC West. I'll just put it that way. And that shows. I have them at 9-3. I have Arkansas at 9-3. So why wouldn't I? But I have a hard time putting them in front of Arkansas. And I have not, for anyone who asks, I haven't officially put out my top to bottom SEC West, SEC East yet. That's in the works. I just published my 2 early. That should tell you something. My 2 early wins and losses for Arkansas. I'm compiling my thoughts for where everyone finishes in the SEC, but I'm struggling with A&M, Mark, just like you.
If we would have known coming off 9-1 in 2020 that A&M was going to beat Bama, nobody would have had them losing 4 other games. But they looked like garbage against Arkansas, Texas, or Mississippi State. You know, they lost to LSU, a 6-7 team. They lost to a lot of marginal teams, not a lot, a few marginal teams. And unfortunately, I got to run. I got a Florida State show, but we want to finish off with Mr. TW's comment here. We appreciate the super chat. Mark and Ty, I think Bama is really the only better team in the West. And by the way, the West is not only the best division in college football like it's been for a long, long time. It's unbelievable that it's now 1 through 7. No outs, no bad teams. Like there was always, Ole Miss was bad at times. You guys were bad for obviously a stretch. There was always a bad team, or maybe even 2 kind of now. Now everybody's, even Auburn. If you take Auburn and put them somewhere else, they could win a division in the ACC. Anyway, it's crazy how good it is now, 1 through 7. A&M delusion continues to grow. Jimbo hasn't produced an elite offense since Jameis Winston, but could Arkansas go 11-1? Is that crazy? No, it's not.
You don't think it's crazy?
No, it's not.
I don't think it's crazy either. I think it. I don't know, Mark. That week to week grind is, like you said, it's ridiculous. I mean, that's tough. And I struggled with getting them. I had a hard time kind of getting them to 9 wins, if I'm being honest. I don't think it's crazy. I always say it's on the table, right? Like something like that. I think it's on the table. Is it within reach? I guess we won't know till after maybe Cincinnati. Maybe that's our first test, and you know, maybe that's our, if we blow them out of the water or whatever happens or whatever unfolds in that game, maybe then, you know, that changes. But I think right now 9 is definitely within reach. 10 is within reach. I think 11 is on the table. Absolutely.
I am keeping people waiting. So we appreciate Ty being here. And again, everybody get on over to Ty's Twitter there, Ty Hudson 83 Hogville Net. Everybody, if you stay right here, Florida State Live's coming as soon as I can turn the link around, and we'll be there. Ty, we appreciate it always. You know that.
Always fun, Mark. Always have a blast with these. First live I've ever done here. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate you guys, and appreciate you, Mark.
And again, keep it right here, Florida State Live, as soon as I can turn around 30 seconds from now.